Hello, and welcome everyone to this ELPC Thinks webinar. My name is Tyler Barron, and I'm a policy advocate with the Environmental Law and Policy Center. ELPC Thinks is an ongoing virtual discussion series where we bring together experts, environmental leaders, and community partners to talk about areas of progress and strategy across the Midwest. Today, we're here to talk about Keep the UP Wild, an effort to secure federal wilderness designations for 4 areas in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. We are recording this webinar and streaming live on Facebook so people can watch and listen if they can't make it today. And feel free, anybody who's attending, to put questions in the Q&A or chat, and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Today, I'm excited to be joined by 2 great panelists who are also members of the Keep the UP Wild Coalition, which now represents more than 330 organizations supporting this push. Our panelists today, Conan Smith from the Michigan Environmental Council and John Muller from the Keweenaw Mountain Lodge in the UP, are going to join in a moment. But we first wanted to talk a bit about wilderness in general and the areas under consideration for protection in the UP. So the first question here is, what is wilderness? Wilderness is federal public land designated by Congress and protected under the Wilderness Act of 1964. Wilderness is the highest level of protection that the federal government can give to a natural place and is meant to maintain the most special federal land as untrammeled, undeveloped, and wild, with opportunities for solitude and primitive, unconfined recreation. Lands that are considered for wilderness are lands where we, as a society, choose to let nature take control. Some basic facts about wilderness. Wilderness only impacts federal land by law, not private land. Areas under consideration today in the Upper Peninsula are Ottawa National Forest lands and will continue to be managed by the Forest Service after they are designated as wilderness. Wilderness is not something that affects payments in lieu of taxes or PILT funding for local communities, and it's still something that allows hunting and fishing. In fact, the Keep the UP Wild Coalition is proud to count the Michigan Duck Hunters Association and several fly fishing guide services as members of the coalition. In addition, wilderness also allows for all sorts of non-motorized recreation like hiking, camping, and kayaking, outfitting, guiding and backpacking, horseback riding, rock climbing, and snowshoeing. And so that brings us to the actual areas under consideration in Michigan. The Keep the UP Wild Coalition is looking to add 3 new areas as wilderness in Ontonagon County. You can see them listed here, 1, 2, and 3, making a near contiguous landmass of wilderness just underneath the Porcupine Mountains and underneath the Keweenaw Peninsula. The 4th area being in addition to the existing Sturgeon River Gorge wilderness of about 2,000 acres in the southwest corner of that wilderness. Now, we can talk about these areas, but I think that we would rather show you first. The Michigan Nature Association, a member of the Keep the UP Wild Coalition, funded and produced this upcoming video highlighting these special places and the importance of protecting them. Let's roll the video.
I think there is something essential for our human spirit in knowing that places that are inherently wild still exist. It touches something inside of us. It assures us that we will always have a connection with nature in its purest form.
In 1964, Congress passed the Wilderness Act, and the idea was to find federal lands that hadn't been touched by human activity and to preserve them in their present state. As we move forward and our footprint on this planet has become so enormous, I think the future is going to be defined by what we refuse to destroy.
Keep the UP Wild is a coalition of people who understand the importance of protecting specific areas that we know are prized for so many reasons.
The proposal is really to identify 4 new federally designated wilderness areas. The Elko Forest is 16,000 acres adjacent to the Porcupine Mountains. And then Trap Hills Wilderness Candidate is 25,000 acres, and the Norwich Wilderness is around 8,000 or 9,000 acres. The fourth natural area is a 2,000 acre addition to the Sturgeon River Gorge Wilderness Area. You add them all together, you're looking at a little bit more than 50,000 acres of new wilderness areas.
These places, they are truly unique in our state by the fact that we've kept them protected for so long. These places are at risk, and we have an opportunity right now to create some permanent protections around them. These are lands that could be logged, that could be mined, they could be turned into recreational areas where RVs and cars and Jeeps are cruising through them.
These are the remaining landscapes among federal ownership in Michigan that have the suitable characteristics to be designated as wilderness. Now is the time to move forward. We can't really afford to wait on these sorts of protections.
We have some of the most biodiverse landscapes in this state. And so much of that is thanks to the Upper Peninsula and how it hasn't been as fragmented and developed as other parts of the United States. If you have long-term federal protections for wilderness areas, that time and protection can really pay off in terms of what can grow and thrive there.
We've come together as Keep the UP Wild to ask the federal government to make a difference by taking a couple of these really pristine places and giving them to future generations forever.
We need to ensure that legislators know people value the actual long-term preservation of wilderness in the Upper Peninsula, and environmental values are a part of many of their constituencies.
We're talking about these last few remaining truly wild places that may represent our last best hope. It is incumbent on our generation to make sure that it is protected and is saved for future generations, not just of Michiganders, but for the rest of the world.
Awesome. Thank you. And now for the main event. We have with us today two members of the Keep the UP Wild Coalition to talk about why they support this project. One will speak on the environmental benefits of wilderness, and the second will talk about how this project will benefit the economy and sustainable tourism in the UP. First, Conan Smith is president and CEO of the Michigan Environmental Council, an experienced nonprofit leader, policy innovator, and respected public official. Conan has been a longtime advocate for the environment, public health, and equity in Michigan. The Ann Arbor native became Michigan Environmental Council's president and CEO in May of 2009, but worked with the organization from 1998 to 2004. Conan previously served for 12 years as executive director of Metro Matters, a Southeast Michigan nonprofit. Take it away, Conan.
Thanks, Tyler. So glad to have everybody on the webinar today. Just in the chat, seeing a couple of really iconic leaders in these movements to preserve and protect Michigan's beautiful places. I cut my teeth on this work with Julie Stoneman, who brought us in and did the video. And she helped me learn that it's not just about the enjoyment and the self-fulfillment we can get from these places, but how critically important it is to protect and preserve them for these future generations, as I said in the video. And then I got to watch this happen with David Swan and his wife as they protected some dunes in the Saugatuck area of Michigan. I'm so glad that both of you guys would be on this webinar with us today. These places up in the Upper Peninsula are unique to Michigan, but they are also among the most important places in the United States that we could put our time, attention, and energy to, especially when we think about the ravages of climate change that are going to affect areas of our country where our population is densifying right now. Recent research from Place Initiatives and others have identified the geographies that are most likely to face migration due to climate, or in migration due to climate. And the Upper Peninsula is right up there amongst them. It is going to be a place that is attractive not just for its natural beauty, but because it has strong resource base, and it's got just it's one of those places that you're going to want to live. And we've seen throughout Michigan, Southeast Michigan in particular, that urban sprawl can really take away the natural splendor. It can impact the ecology, it can impact the wildlife. And if we don't do things when we have chances like this to protect those places, we really do lose them forever. And these 4 sites in the Upper Peninsula become emblematic of the geography, the flora, the fauna that represents that beautiful place that is the Upper Peninsula. It's a lot like, in my mind, incredible places like Anwar, where you get to see nature in its true splendor. You see it develop untouched. You see how things would be if we let the world just go its own way. And we need that. We need that as human beings. We need to be able to see that there is a natural order to things and how that flows. It gives us inspiration. It gives us comfort. And it doesn't cost us very much. In fact, it costs us nothing to make sure that these places exist in perpetuity.
Awesome. Thank you, Conan. Next, we have John Muller. John is the general manager of the Keweenaw Mountain Lodge, a historic resort at the top of the Keweenaw, which was built in 1934 under the Works Progress Administration. The lodge now focuses on outdoor activities, rustic, worldly food, and education. John is a professor at St. Edward's University, focusing on innovation and entrepreneurship, and has previously taught at Fresno State and Western Michigan University. The Austin, Texas native is the founder of Keweenaw Resort LLC, which owns the lodge. John, to you.
Thanks, Tyler. It's great to be a part of this. Conan, excellent introduction there, piece there. So I'll just add on to what others have said, as well as add on to the video that was nicely done by the Michigan Nature Association. Tyler, you mentioned the Keweenaw Mountain Lodge as being a resort that focuses on outdoor activities, focuses on rustic worldly food, being in the North Woods, getting that environment, and then education. That education piece is really key for us. It's similar to why we're on this call today, is to educate people of why to foster the wilderness piece. So I tend to use the word foster because you're actually allowing things to happen. And so to be able to have the federal government come in and help foster up to 50,000 acres for people to come up and get away from the urban sprawl that Conan mentioned is really important. Over the last 2 years, with what's happened in the world in regards to the pandemic and COVID-19, and people not able to do their normal things that they got used to in terms of the rat race and so forth, we saw a large increase in the number of people that came up to the Keweenaw and came up to the UP. They were able to have time to get away from downtown Chicago, downtown Detroit, Grand Rapids, and Kalamazoo, and they really enjoyed it. One of the things that we hear all the time coming up to the resort is how quiet it is. In regards to the solitude, the sereneness, and so forth, that happens year round, be it the winter time or be it the summertime. And so you have people that are really craving that type of connection with what they don't have in their everyday life. An example of that is the International Dark Sky Association that we're working with. And so people have grown up in Chicago or Detroit, haven't seen the stars. They get there, and they come in at 9 or 10 o'clock at night, and they basically just look up and enjoy and relax a little bit. They get the best night of sleep at the lodge, they say. And we don't have to do that much. We basically just allow things to happen in a natural format, and that's something that was really important for us. It allows these things to happen. And with these 50,000 acres, you provide a destination for that to happen. And so we saw a 30% increase in the number of people that came up in 2020. We saw the same number in 2021, and based upon our bookings this year, we're actually seeing another 20% increase. And so sustainability is a big piece for us. One of our underlying values in terms of who we hire, the guests that we have, is basically the table stakes are value your team members, value the guests, value the community, and value the environment. And if you don't come to the table with those, you can forget about all the other stuff that we end up doing to really enjoy your time. And so tourism is about visitors. coming and going and so forth. And that's a vibrancy that we want to be able to have for many people in Michigan, in Wisconsin, throughout the Midwest and around. I tend to equate the Upper Peninsula and Keweenaw with Alaska and with like Yellowstone and Yosemite National Parks. And we have the opportunity to continue doing that here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So I'm going to be presenting some questions to our panelists, but while we're talking, please feel free to continue to add your own questions in the Q&A or chat. Just click the chat icon. It looks like a cartoon word balloon with 3 dots in it, and then type your question out. We'll answer as many as possible. And John, I want to piggyback a little bit off of what you were saying there in terms of your kind of existing bookings right now and how your business has really seen a growth based on that ecotourism side of things. Do you think that that's a broader trend in the Upper Peninsula in general? And how do you think that that kind of looks right now?
So our increase was actually on the lower end. We actually held things back on purpose, it's part of our sustainability piece. But if you talk to anyone else in the upper, the Keweenaw, as well as Munison and Marquette, and you can go all the way to the Sioux on the east side of the UP, and they didn't have enough staff to take care of the people there in terms of how many people came. As well, you had a different type of person coming. People that, again, it's not the people that always come, it's the people that are actually experiencing it in a new fashion. And then they tell you, look, we're going to come back next year. We're going to come back during the wintertime. We're going to come back during the summertime, the fall colors, see the birds, and so forth. And so we were on the low end in terms of the number of people that we experienced because we held it back a little bit.
Awesome. And Conan, maybe I can ask you to piggyback a little bit off of that. What are your thoughts about kind of the broader environmental benefits of wilderness for the larger region? I guess we could even expand that out to the UP.
I didn't get to tell you this, John, in our pre-meeting, but there's a woman who worked at MEC for 22 years, Judy Barup and Rich Barup. I don't know if you've run across them, but they spend 2 weeks up at your lodge every year. And Judy just gushes. Like I've seen tears come to her eyes as she described the experience at the lodge and how just pristine the environment is and how it restored her soul. And she worked for the environmentalists, right? So she would come up to your place and it would rejuvenate her in ways that are, indescribable. And I think that tourism industry in the Upper Peninsula is critically important. And Tyler, we see it growing. John's right. We see the data from the Michigan Economic Development Corporation that shows us that growth in 2020, when the pandemic pushed people out to do this exploration, was sustained in 2021. And I hope we'll see that continue. Being in the tourism industry, John, you could probably tell folks more about this. It's still a hard life, right? It's seasonal with its ups and downs and challenges, but there are some emerging industries that benefit from the protection of these places and the strong tourism architecture that we already have in the Upper Peninsula. The industries that build the toys, right? So the folks who make cross-country skis and snowshoes, the folks who build mountain bikes, those industries are dramatically increasing in Michigan and across the country, to the point where 2 years ago, Governor Gretchen Whitmer created the first Office of Outdoor Recreation Industry in our state, recognizing that this is an increasing and important part of our state economy. There's probably no better place to root that economy than close to the things that people want to explore. And those are places like the Upper Peninsula. So let's give people not just an opportunity to protect them for their ecological value, but let's also build some of our economy in these places in ways that emphasize our sustainability values.
Awesome. And John, what do you think really at its core is the draw of wilderness? What makes people drawn to that type of land?
So we have a couple different target markets that we focus on with this. One is the outdoor enthusiast. They want to go out and exercise, they want to get fit and so forth. So that's mountain biking, that's hiking, that's trail running. You then also have the water sports and so forth. So that's one piece. People are able to go out and do a run. I trail run, and so it's a lot better to run on the trails in the Keweenaw than it is in downtown Austin or in Ann Arbor or in Detroit and so forth. You get your mind away from things. I think better that way when I'm running with that. The other piece is you feel that you can slow down. And right now, it's so tough. I mean, everyone's life is a startup. I teach entrepreneurship, but what happens is a startup has to think about every single decision in its life. And once you make a decision, then you can build upon that and so forth. And we built our lives on that. And so everyone's basic decisions had to be revisited over the last 2 years because of the pandemic. And so this gave the people the ability to basically relax mentally and really get back to who they are.
And Conan, I think the question, that we talked a little bit about was the draw of wilderness in general for that region, but really what are the environmental benefits that come from designating an area as wilderness?
So to me, one of the most important is just our understanding of how these native ecologies thrive and are sustained. We live in a global society, and part of the challenges with that are that we import species from all around the globe into our state. And those invasive species thrive here because they don't have competition. And so the native flora and fauna find themselves outmatched in many cases. By protecting places as wilderness and by stewarding them intentionally, we're able to ensure that those creatures that existed before the impacts of globalization have an opportunity to thrive, and they're good for us to visit, to see. I go one step further, Tyler, and say this is important because our society moves so fast, our culture moves so fast, but nature moves really slow. And being able to create some places where those systems can develop as they're supposed to be teaches us things about this planet that we can't otherwise learn. So protecting areas as wilderness, saving them from the encroachment of human society is good for human society. It gives us an opportunity to see things that we would not otherwise see, both scientifically and spiritually.
Awesome. And Conan, I think that's kind of the end of our direct questions to you guys on behalf of ELPC, but I see that we have some great questions from our audience. So again, please keep those coming in if the audience has any more. Conan, I think this might be a good question for you, but who in your mind might be some good perspective congressional champions when it comes to this type of stuff, especially on the Michigan side of things specifically?
Yeah, I saw a little bit of back and forth in the chat of questioning whether this is a partisan issue or not, and I don't believe it is. I think you'll see strong congressional championing on both sides of the aisle for these kinds of activities. Of course, there are real parochial issues that the lawmakers in the Upper Peninsula are going to have to deal with. The extractive industries, mining, forestry, they create a lot of jobs up there, and it is a place that needs economic development. But if we can address those economic development concerns while simultaneously protecting this land, which I think we can, we'll see support generated on both sides of the aisle. Specifically in Michigan, my own member of Congress, Debbie Dingell, has been a tremendous champion of wilderness designation. She and her late husband, John Dingell, were together responsible for some of the most beautiful protected areas in Southeast Michigan. And she knows how to work this system. So we've got a strong and vibrant champion there, I'm sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Conan. And I might take it upon myself to answer one quick question from the audience here. So I see a couple questions on, having concerning the tribes and indigenous perspectives on this. I can state very confidently that we've been working with the tribes very closely on this. I would argue that they are one of, if not our largest prioritization on this project, and have been working especially closely with the tribes of the western part of the UP who have existing treaty rights in these lands, as they are a part of the Treaty of 1842, and are developing a strategy to make sure that their treaty rights are acknowledged, respected, and protected when it comes to protecting these areas. But overall, the support has been there so long as treaty rights can be respected, protected, and reinforced when it comes to something like this. John, I think that this might be an interesting question just from your perspective, but we've got some questions about, what do you think people can do to kind of help move this effort forward? And I think that can be as kind of local as UP people specifically, or Michiganders as a whole.
Yeah, so, Conan mentioned the economic aspect of things, and providing year-round jobs, for people to come up to the UP and stay there year-round is really a big piece. I was on a call yesterday with a coalition of hospitality, companies, and we're working on, how do you create better companies to work for, so that people want to basically work for the company and basically make the UP the best hospitality group of companies that you have. And so if you think about that, if they're in alignment with the destination of a wilderness aspect of it, and you create companies that people want to work for because they're certified B Corps, they value the employees, they value the environment, and they're still financially sustainable, you're going to create vibrancy in the community and people want to work together. It's very similar to the craft beer industry 20 years ago. They want to work together as opposed to compete together, and it's not cutthroat, it's actually growing the pie. But if you can create a sustainable living environment for people, because it goes back to the balance. This isn't about saying that it's all going to be wilderness. This is about a designation of 50,000 acres, and I think I saw someone mention how many acres there are already in the UP. This is a small piece of it, and so you still have Okanagan there, you still have Ironwood, Iron Mountain, you still have Houghton where Michigan Tech is, and you create innovation through those educational institutions like Northern Michigan and so forth. So if you can create jobs that are year-round, that are tied to fostering the wilderness, that would be awesome.
Mm-hmm. And John, I think that point kind of speaks to the broader consideration for this work, which is really to reflect the desire for Michiganders to see something like this happen, and not find ourselves constrained necessarily to this being an environmental push or something by out-of-towners. That this is something clearly that the people of the state want to see, and we've approach the business community, the religious community, the tribes, the environment community, and really kind of cast that wide net very much on purpose to kind of build this support here.
Hey, Tyler.
Yeah.
I saw in the chat too that there was a point about sort of the culture of residents in the UP being wary of federal government ownership of the lands. And I think it's important to note that most, if not all, of these lands that are proposed for wilderness protection are already federally owned lands. So you wouldn't be adding to the federal portfolio so much as restricting the kinds of activities that would happen on some portions of land that are already within public ownership.
Yeah, it's a great point to reinforce there, Conan. You can only designate federal land as federal wilderness, and so all of the land under consideration here is federal land. And all that we're simply doing is adding some additional protections to areas that we feel like are deserving of those protections. And so really our focus here is to really rock the boat as little as possible, while also ensuring that those areas can be protected for generations to come. So I think that it's a great point to reinforce there. Thank you for that. I see just a couple quick questions that I think we can address. I see a question from Martin here that's talking about, in addition to the Sylvania wilderness, not aware of any effort there on our end. This doesn't have anything to do with that. So sorry that we can't answer that some more. And then a question about the designating process and how wilderness is done. And so wilderness is designated by Congress. And the process that we're in right now, we do not have an official bill in Congress, but are moving towards creating that bill right now. And so very much kind of in the middle of the process right now and working to advance that every day. And I am trying to see here if we have any more questions to give to our panelists. John, I think this might be a good question for you. You know, if we're talking about obviously having organizations sign on in support of this, having 330 plus organizations a part of the Keep the UP Wild Coalition, is there anything that you think on your end that individual people could do, whether that's call up businesses and show their support in that way that are a part of the coalition, tell non-coalition supporters to join the coalition, call Congress, anything on top of that you think would be especially helpful for you on the business side of things?
Well, right now we're moving in the right direction, right? So last 2 or 3 years have been really nice, and you're seeing that with the 330 companies and organizations that have joined on that piece there, and educating, people like we're doing here is a part. And I think you're going to get more and more people that are going to be able to do that, and then letting them educate others. And so, that's a piece to where you're going out and talking about how this is a great way to enjoy the wilderness. When I was working out at Fresno State, I would basically work during the daytime in my office, working with East Coast faculty members, and then drive an hour to 2 hours north and be in Yosemite and spend basically the afternoon eating lunch and doing the rest of my work up there. And so if we can get people to do the same thing and actually enjoy the wilderness up there, and you're seeing the people actually in these places, that's a good sign that, we're doing a good thing, for the environment and for the community. Because what happens is, if people are going to be involved with businesses that are supporting this, and then that becomes a financial sustainability for those businesses. They're out there enjoying the fishing, the hiking, and so forth. That's the best thing to do for this.
Awesome, thanks, John. And Conan, I see one of the points that we kind of always receive on this is a question about kind of ATV and snowmobile use, and broadly speaking, ATVs and snowmobiles are not allowed in wilderness. But when we were selecting these areas, took kind of great consideration to make sure that we kind of impacted ATV and snowmobile riders as little as possible. I'm wondering if you could talk just a little bit more about that.
This is a perennial challenge, not just in wilderness designation, but in all of our natural resource lands management. What uses go where? And I think we have to, just for the good of ourselves, acknowledge that not every use belongs on every square foot of every piece of land. It's okay for us to say that there aren't going to be ATVs or snowmobiles on part of this, and it's going to be restricted to foot traffic and to canoeing or whatever we want to do on the sturgeon there. It's okay. It's not gonna take away the opportunity to really enjoy those activities in places directly adjacent that are equally beautiful. It is going to offer something as an alternative, which is that utter silence of being in true wilderness, right? Which you can't really get anywhere else. And that's something magical. That's something worth having. It's an experience worth being able to offer just as much as having a snowmobile trail or an ATV trail is.
Conan, the way that I kind of put it is that if we have a multi-use forest, it has to be for multiple uses, right? I think that speaks to your point there. A quick question about handicap access. So motorized wheelchairs are allowed in wilderness. Handicap access is always a consideration and a priority when it comes to wilderness. And so handicap access is something that is not a problem when it comes to this type of stuff, because of the Americans with Disabilities Act.
I'd love to build off of something John was saying about the UP economics too. There was a point or a question earlier about mining, which is an important industry in the Upper Peninsula, and the availability of certain metals for our own ecological interests as well. Like we need copper for wiring if we're going to electrify homes, for example. One of the things that we don't do very well in this country is establish circular economies. So a lot of those metals a lot of the things that we mine from in these extractive industries go to waste and land in landfills. And, let's think about that as an economic development opportunity too, not just that we might be losing the opportunity to dig into a handful of places in the Upper Peninsula. Nothing wrong with saying, let's build a recovery plant in the Upper Peninsula and employ a bunch of people to serve that same purpose while simultaneously protecting this thing next door.
Awesome. Thanks, Conan. I see a couple questions here about local support. So I first want to say that all of our supporters are listed on keeptheupwild.com. That's our project-specific microsite for this work. But the local support here has been really the key focus of ours since the start of this project, and that this really does not move forward without local support. It's one of the main reasons why we have John talking here today and not somebody from downstate. And so prioritizing those local voices and making sure that this is clearly something that's supported by the locals is something that we are very serious about. We can point easily to a couple groups. So UPEC is an obvious one. Folk, great partner on this project. The UP Wild Church has been excellent with us. We also have the endorsement from UPTRA, which is the Upper Peninsula Travel and Recreation Association. That's the umbrella organization for all travel, for all visitors bureaus. John, correct me if I'm wrong, for the entire Upper Peninsula. And so I think that speaks to our past efforts to secure that support and also our focus on that moving forward as well. Conan and John, I'm wondering if you guys have any more points that you would like to build off of what each other has said.
So I'm going to chime in on things that people want to make this an or situation, and this should be an and situation. And so this goes back to where we're working together. An example is a piece of property that we just worked with on the county next door to us, and basically they were having issues with liability and the trails and so forth. So we picked up the baton and ran with it, and basically work with the public institutions, work with nonprofits and private institutions. Ends up being you have CORC, the Keweenaw Outdoor Recreation Coalition, which is about all the outdoor activities up in the Keweenaw, the Trails Club, and ourselves to ensure that there's going to be 12 miles of trail on that piece of property. The same thing with this. And so what happens is you realize you can do public-private partnerships throughout the UP, throughout this wilderness piece, and this is just a piece of it. So if you can create balance and the and situation as opposed to an or situation, then it's going to be a vibrant and wonderful solution.
Man, I don't know what you add to that. That's so perfectly said, John.
Awesome. Well, I think that this is a good moment to maybe wrap up a bit. This is incredibly important work, and we're so grateful to work with you both as members of the Keep the UP Wild Coalition. Thank you to everyone for joining today. Thank you to the Michigan Nature Association for their video, and please everyone visit keeptheupwild.com to learn more about this push and sign on individually to join the coalition as well. There's only a couple tabs on the website, so it should be pretty easy to figure out, we hope. We have a couple ELPC Thinks coming up that we'd love for you all to join. A discussion with Cook County Forest Preserve Superintendent Arnold Randall on April 25th, and Dr. Drew Gonwald from the University of Michigan to discuss Great Lakes water levels on May 9th. So keep an eye out for those invitations. Thank you again for joining us, and let's keep the UP wild.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, ELPC.